I laughed when I saw my birthday cake, because the other option was flipping the table in front of 12 guests while my 11-year-old son watched me break. Across the chocolate frosting, in glossy pink script, were the words "Happy Birthday, Claire." My name is Elena. Claire was my husband's ex-wife. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The candles hissed softly where melted wax touched frosting. My best friend, Maya, stopped with her phone halfway to the table. My son, Noah, looked from the cake to me, then to Daniel. He still had chocolate frosting on his cheek from the cupcake he had been allowed to steal before dinner. I remember that detail because it was the only innocent thing in the room. Margaret, my mother-in-law, stood at the end of the table in a pearl gray suit, holding the empty bakery box as though she had just presented me with a bouquet. "Oh, no," she said, pressing 2 fingers to her lips. "The bakery must have mixed up the names. Old habits, I suppose." Her eyes met mine. There was no surprise in them. Daniel's first marriage had ended 6 years earlier. Margaret still mailed Claire a Christmas card. She still kept Claire's wedding portrait in the upstairs hallway of her home in Lake Forest. She had once introduced me to a neighbor as Daniel's current wife, as if I were leasing the position month to month. But this was different. This cruelty had been ordered, paid for, carried into my house, and placed in front of my child. I looked at Noah. His shoulders had tightened. He knew enough about adults to recognize humiliation, but not enough to understand why grown people sometimes turned love into a weapon. So I laughed. "Don't worry," I told the table. "We don't take Margaret's memory seriously either. We'll cut around it." A few guests laughed too quickly. Maya made a sound that was almost a cough. Margaret's smile slipped. I handed Maya the cake knife. She scraped away Claire's name while whispering, "This is sick." Daniel stood beside me, pale and silent. Normally, he would have said, "Mom, that's enough," in the gentle tone people use with a dog stealing food. Later, in the car or our bedroom, he would apologize for her. He had apologized so many times that the words had become another household chore. But an apology after every injury does not repair a home. It teaches the person causing the damage that someone else will always clean the floor. We finished the party. People sang off-key. I opened the green sweater Noah had chosen for me. We took photographs beside a cake with a blank smear of white frosting where another woman's name had been. Margaret ate a slice and praised the bakery. When she left, she kissed Daniel on the cheek and ignored Noah, who was standing 4 feet away holding the door. That hurt more than the cake. Noah was 4 when his father, Luis, died in a highway accident outside Milwaukee. Luis's parents remained part of our lives. They came to school concerts, mailed ridiculous Halloween packages, and never treated my remarriage as a betrayal. Noah had already survived the kind of loss that changes the architecture of a child. When I married Daniel, I promised myself that no adult would make him feel like baggage attached to me. Margaret had never openly called him baggage. She preferred smaller cuts. She forgot his birthday but remembered the birthday of Claire's niece. She bought Christmas gifts labeled, "For the family," and then looked surprised when Noah opened one. She called him Elena's boy even after Daniel began calling him our son. When he made her a clay bowl at school, she left it in the gift bag beneath her coat. Each incident was small enough to deny. Together, they formed a map. That night, after the last guest left, I washed plates in silence. Noah sat at the kitchen island pretending to finish math homework while sending messages to his cousin. Daniel carried trash to the garage, returned, and leaned against the doorway. "It's over," he said. I turned off the faucet. Emotionally, or for real? For real. Noah looked up. Daniel glanced toward him, then crossed the room and sat on the stool beside him. "Your grandmother did something cruel tonight," Daniel said. "It wasn't funny, and it wasn't an accident. I should have stopped this sooner." Noah stared at his worksheet. "She doesn't like Mom. She doesn't get to punish your mom for that. She doesn't get to make you uncomfortable either." I had waited 4 years to hear him say it without an excuse attached. After Noah went upstairs, Daniel told me why the cake had changed something in him. His father had cheated on Margaret for most of their marriage. There had been women from work, a neighbor, someone from their church, and a realtor Margaret called the Redhead for 10 years after the affair ended. Margaret had turned Daniel into her confidant when he was still a child. At 9, he had been asked whether she looked old. At 12, he had sorted motel receipts she found in his father's coat. At 16, he had listened to voicemails from women he had never met. "I wasn't her son," he said. "I was the husband who was supposed to be loyal." When Daniel was 23, Margaret pushed him toward Claire. Claire came from the right family, wore the right dresses, and spoke warmly about babies whenever Margaret was present. The marriage lasted 5 years. Behind closed doors, Claire controlled money, insulted Daniel, and threatened to disappear whenever he challenged her. When he finally filed for divorce, Margaret treated him as though he had destroyed the only respectable future available to him. Then I arrived, a widow with a child, a career as a physical therapist, in-laws from my first marriage whom I still loved, and no interest in asking Margaret for permission. To her, I was not simply the wrong daughter-in-law. I was evidence that Daniel could choose a life she had not designed. She used Claire's name because she knew exactly where to cut, he said. And she did it in front of Noah because she wanted him to understand that you and he are temporary. The sentence made the kitchen feel colder. What are you going to do? I asked. Daniel looked at the ruined cake. Something I should have done years ago. Margaret's birthday was 2 weeks later. I did not want to attend. Daniel asked me to trust him, which sounded dangerous under the circumstances. Her home was full of relatives, neighbors, white flowers, polished silver, and enough catered food to make cruelty look elegant. Margaret greeted Daniel with damp eyes and me with a stiff nod. She did not acknowledge Noah until he handed her a card. Then she said, "How thoughtful," without opening it. Halfway through dinner, Daniel went to his car and returned carrying a bakery box. Margaret brightened. "You remembered my favorite place." "I remembered a lot of things," he said. He set the cake in front of her and lifted the lid. Written across the white frosting were 4 first names, the women whose affairs with Daniel's late father had become family knowledge. Daniel had not chosen rumors. He had chosen names Margaret herself had forced him to memorize as a child. The dining room went silent. Margaret's face drained of color. "What is this?" "I thought we were putting memorable women from other people's marriages on birthday cakes." She looked at me. "Not Daniel. Me." "You did this," she said. "No," Daniel replied. "I did." She called me poisonous, vulgar, insecure, and jealous. Of a woman Daniel had divorced before he met me. Daniel never raised his voice. "You made me carry your marriage when I was a child," he said. "You made me listen to details no child should hear. Tonight you humiliated my wife with the name of my ex because you wanted to remind her that you preferred the woman you chose. Stop pretending you don't know what you do." Margaret began to cry, but Daniel continued. "Elena and Noah are my family. You will respect both of them, or you will not be in our lives." An aunt whispered that he had gone too far. Margaret shoved the cake away so violently that a glass fell and broke. Noah flinched. I put my hand on his shoulder. "We're leaving," I said. In the car, Daniel did not celebrate. His hands shook on the steering wheel. "I regret that it came to that," he said. "I don't regret stopping her. I believed the birthday cakes were the ugliest point our family would reach. I was wrong." The next morning, Daniel's phone contained 31 missed calls. An ad said Margaret had been taken to an urgent care clinic for anxiety. A cousin accused me of isolating Daniel. Someone created a family group chat titled Save Daniel and added us both. Margaret sent a photograph of herself in a medical waiting room with no message attached. Daniel blocked the group. Then he sat at the kitchen table staring at his hands. Guilt was an old rope around his neck. Margaret had spent decades teaching him that her pain was proof of his failure. I could see him wanting to breathe and apologize at the same time. "If she gets worse," I asked, "and everyone says you abandoned her, will you blame me?" He took a long time to answer. "No. But I need you to know how ugly this may get." He told me more about his childhood. Nights when Margaret cried on the bathroom floor and refused to answer him until he promised never to leave, mornings when she searched his backpack because she believed his father was using him to carry messages, a college acceptance 3 states away that he declined after she said she might not survive the loneliness. I kept thinking that if I could make her feel safe, she would become safe, he said. It never happened. That afternoon, he wrote one final message. He said there would be no contact until Margaret took responsibility without excuses, respected me as his wife, and recognized Noah as part of our family. He told relatives that messages delivered on her behalf would also be blocked. Then we closed every door we could find. For several weeks, silence felt like a sound. Daniel checked his phone even when it had not vibrated. Noah stopped asking whether Margaret would come to his soccer games. I found myself rehearsing arguments in the shower with a woman who was not present. Still, our home became lighter. We ate breakfast without discussing the latest insult. We took a weekend trip to Madison and left our phones in the hotel safe while we walked beside the lake. On a Tuesday morning in March, I cried because someone had finished a cereal I did not even like. I was also nauseated, furious at the smell of coffee, and 8 days late. I took a pregnancy test before work and sat on the bathroom floor staring at the result as though it were written in another language. I had wanted another child, but wanting something in theory is different from seeing 2 pink lines announce that your body has already made a decision. Daniel found me there. For one terrible second, his face went blank. Then he dropped to his knees and covered his mouth. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know. Are you?" He laughed and cried at once. I think so. I think I'm terrified. Noah learned that evening. His first question was whether he would have to change diapers. Only if you want spending money, Daniel said. Then this baby is going to be expensive. That was how our family handled joy, love wrapped in bad jokes. We waited until I was safely into my second trimester before sharing the news. The photograph showed the three of us holding an ultrasound printout. Noah wore a shirt that said Promoted to Big Brother. I posted it for friends and relatives, not thinking that one of Daniel's cousins would immediately send it to Margaret. Within 2 hours, a message arrived from an account with no photograph. I know I don't deserve it, but please let me apologize before my grandchild is born. My grandchild. Not your children. Not Noah. The baby. Daniel read the message twice and blocked the account. More appeared. Margaret sent letters through relatives, cards without return addresses, and an infant blanket embroidered with the Bennett family crest, which was not a real crest at all but something she had ordered online. Every message mentioned blood, legacy, the family name, and her right to know Daniel's child. Not one mentioned Noah. Daniel responded once through a cousin we trusted. He wrote that any possible reconciliation had to begin with respect for our entire family, including both children. Margaret's reply came within an hour. Of course I have nothing against Elena's boy, but a newborn needs blood relatives from the beginning. I printed the message. Keep it, I told Daniel. This isn't over. At 6 months pregnant, I received a certified letter from an attorney in Cook County. It was not a lawsuit. It was a demand for mediation, written to look more powerful than it was. Margaret claimed Daniel's estrangement resulted from my coercive influence and requested scheduled access to our unborn child after delivery. I read it in the hospital parking garage after a prenatal appointment. My hands became so cold I dropped my keys. Daniel called the attorney listed on the letter. The attorney would only say his client wanted to preserve a grandparent relationship. Daniel replied that no relationship existed because the child had not been born, and that Margaret had rejected our older child. We hired our own family law attorney, Rachel Kim. Rachel had a calm voice and a talent for making panic feel inefficient. Illinois does not give a grandparent automatic visitation because she wants it, Rachel explained. Especially when both fit parents agree. But document everything. Do not threaten her. Do not negotiate directly. And tighten your privacy. We installed a doorbell camera and changed the code on Noah's school pickup list. We gave the hospital written instructions. We created a folder containing messages, letters, screenshots, and dates. I hated that preparing for my daughter's birth now included preparing for an adult who spoke about her as inherited property. Margaret changed tactics. She sent a handwritten apology addressed only to Daniel. She admitted the cake had been poor judgment, but said grief over losing Claire as a daughter-in-law sometimes confused her. She wrote that I should understand because I had also lost a spouse. Using my husband's death to excuse humiliating me was so precise that I almost admired the cruelty. Then came the first twist none of us expected. Claire contacted me. Her message began, "You don't know me, and I realize my name has already caused enough damage." We met at a coffee shop in Evanston. Claire was not the polished villain Margaret had described, nor the manipulative ghost I had imagined. She was 38, tired, direct, and embarrassed. She apologized for the cake even though she had nothing to do with it. "Margaret called me before your birthday," she said. She asked the exact spelling of my name for a surprise. I thought she was ordering something for my mother. When I saw a photo of your cake, I understood. She showed me the messages. Margaret had asked whether Claire ever regretted the divorce. She had suggested Daniel was unhappy and controlled. Claire had replied that the marriage ended for good reasons and that Margaret needed to leave him alone. "I wasn't good to Daniel," Claire said. "I was angry and controlling. But his mother fed every bad instinct I had. Whenever we fought, she told me a wife had to manage him because he was weak. When he finally left, she told me to contest everything so he would come home to her." Claire had saved voicemails too. In one, Margaret said, "If Daniel has a baby with that woman, Claire, you will disappear from his life forever. You need to remind him what a real marriage looked like." That sentence changed the cake. It had not only been an insult. It had been bait. Margaret hoped Claire would re-enter Daniel's life, or at least become a weapon sharp enough to damage ours. Claire agreed to give Rachel copies of the messages and a written statement. She did not ask for forgiveness or friendship. "I spent years blaming Daniel for everything," she said. "I'm trying to become someone who can admit what I did. His mother isn't. Be careful." When I told Daniel, he sat in silence for several minutes. "She used both of you," he finally said. "Yes. And I let her keep doing it. You stopped. That's what matters now." He shook his head. "Stopping isn't enough. Noah needs something permanent." That was the second twist. Daniel had been quietly researching step-parent adoption for months. Luis's parents supported it, provided Noah wanted it and understood it would not erase his father. Because Luis was dead, the legal process required consent and review but not a custody fight. Daniel had already spoken to Rachel about what it would mean. We asked Noah at the dining table where the wrong name Cake had once sat. "You don't have to change your last name," Daniel told him. "You don't have to call me Dad. You don't have to choose between me and your father. I want to adopt you because I already make decisions like your parent, and I want the law to match the promise. But only if you want it." Noah stared at the wood grain. "Would Grandpa and Grandma Rivera still be my grandparents?" "Always," I said. "Would Dad's pictures stay up?" "Always," Daniel said. Noah nodded slowly. "Then I want it. But I'm keeping Rivera in my name." Daniel smiled through tears. "Good. It suits you." We filed the petition quietly. Margaret knew nothing about it. Keeping the adoption quiet was harder than filing it. Noah wanted to tell his best friend, Owen, and Owen had a mother who volunteered with 2 women from Margaret's church. We explained that it was not a secret because anyone should feel ashamed. It was private because some people used information as a key to doors they had been asked not to open. Noah understood that better than an 11-year-old should. The home study social worker, Ms. Patel, visited us on a Saturday morning. I cleaned the house until it looked like nobody lived there, then realized that a professional evaluating a family would probably be more suspicious of a home without socks, cereal boxes, or fingerprints. Daniel took 3 decorative pillows off the couch and tossed Noah's sneakers back near the door. "We are applying to adopt a child, not to sell a staged condominium," he said. Ms. Patel spoke with each of us separately. She asked me whether grief for Luis complicated my feelings about the adoption. The honest answer was yes. I loved Daniel. I trusted him. I also felt a strange ache at the thought of a legal document naming someone else as Noah's father. It was not rational. Luis could not be replaced, and Daniel had never tried. Still, paperwork has a bluntness the heart does not. "I worry that people will think I am editing Luis out," I admitted. "What does Noah think?" "He thinks families can add without subtracting." Ms. Patel smiled. "Children sometimes understand legal identity better than adults." She asked Daniel why he wanted the adoption now. "Because I should have done it before my mother forced us to defend whether he belongs," he said. "But I don't want this to be a reaction to her. I want it because if Elena is injured, I need unquestioned authority to care for him. If he is in a hospital, I want nobody wondering whether I am family. And if something happens to me, I want him to inherit as my son without depending on everyone's goodwill." Later, Ms. Patel spoke to Noah in his room. We could hear only a few words through the wall. She asked about Luis. Noah showed her the wooden airplane his father had built. He showed her a photograph of Daniel coaching soccer in the rain. When they came downstairs, she was carrying neither a forced smile nor a professional frown. "He is clear about what he wants," she told us. Margaret, meanwhile, began building a public version of our conflict. She posted vague messages about parental alienation and grandparents erased by controlling spouses. She never named us, but relatives recognized the details. Friends sent screenshots despite our request not to. In one post, she wrote that modern families discarded elders after taking everything they had given. The claim was almost funny. Daniel had paid his own college loans, never worked for the family business, and refused a down payment gift because Margaret wanted her name on our deed. But facts were not the purpose. The posts turned her from an adult facing consequences into a grandmother, persecuted for loving too much. Maya offered to reply publicly. Daniel said no. "If we argue beneath every lie, we move into her story," he said. "Our evidence goes to Rachel, not Facebook." That restraint cost him. He lost contact with an uncle who had taken him fishing as a boy. 2 cousins stopped inviting us to gatherings. A family friend returned our Christmas card unopened. Boundaries are often described as peaceful lines drawn by emotionally healthy people. Nobody mentions the empty chairs that can appear afterward. One Sunday, Daniel sat alone in the garage with the engine off. I found him holding an old photograph of himself at 10, standing beside Margaret at a school concert. "She wasn't terrible every day," he said. "That's what makes this hard. She packed lunches. She sat beside me when I had pneumonia. She worked 2 jobs for a year after Dad's business failed. I can remember all of that and still know she is dangerous to us now." I sat in the passenger seat. "You don't have to turn her into a monster to justify protecting us." "Sometimes I wish I could. Monsters are easier to leave." At my next prenatal appointment, the doctor noticed my blood pressure had risen. It was not dangerous yet, but she asked about stress, sleep, and support. I began seeing a counselor who specialized in pregnancy after loss. Luis's death, the new baby, Margaret's campaign, and the adoption had created emotional rooms I kept entering without lights. The counselor asked what frightened me most. That Daniel will eventually resent me, I said. That Sophie will grow up and think I kept her from a grandmother who loved her. That Noah will believe every legal fight started because he existed. Which of those fears is supported by the behavior in your home? None of them. That did not make them disappear, but it gave me somewhere to stand. We created ordinary rituals on purpose. Friday pizza. Sunday calls with the Riveras. A jar where Noah dropped name ideas for the baby, most of them borrowed from video game characters. Daniel read aloud from a parenting book and objected to every sentence that implied newborn sleep could be organized. We painted the nursery a soft green because I refused to live inside pink. Symbolism merely because we were having a girl. For 3 weeks, Margaret remained quiet. Then a package arrived from an expensive children's store. Inside was a silver rattle engraved with the initials SMB. We had never publicly shared Sophie's middle name. My stomach tightened. Only 6 people knew it: us, Maya, Luis's parents, and Daniel's sister, Rebecca. Rebecca called that evening already crying. Margaret had told her she was in therapy and wanted to make a private memory book for the baby. Rebecca had given her the middle name, the expected delivery month, and the name of our hospital system. I thought it would calm her down, she said. Daniel closed his eyes. His sister was 4 years younger and carried the same childhood training. You gave medical location information to someone we told you not to contact for us, he said. Do you understand why that is dangerous? She's our mother. And this is our child. Rebecca apologized, but the breach forced another choice. Daniel removed her from the list of people who would receive immediate birth news. It hurt them both. Margaret had found a way to make even other people's mistakes orbit her. Rachel sent a formal notice to Margaret's attorney stating that gifts would be returned, indirect information gathering documented, and any hospital appearance treated as unwanted contact. The attorney replied that Margaret denied surveillance and had obtained the information through a loving family member. They just admitted the information gathering in the sentence denying it, Rachel said. We added the letter to the folder. Noah noticed more than we told him. One night he asked whether the baby would be safer if he lived with his grandparents for a while. I felt something inside me tear. Why would you think that? Because she gets mad when Daniel says I'm his son. Maybe if I wasn't here, she would stop. Daniel set down his fork. Listen to me, he said. A family that becomes peaceful only after one child leaves is not peaceful. It is broken. You are not leaving. Noah looked toward me. Even when the baby comes? Especially then, I said. She needs her brother. The next week, he painted Sister Security on a cardboard badge and wore it through dinner. Under the joke was a decision: he would not volunteer to disappear. At 8 months pregnant, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the doorbell camera alerted while I was folding baby clothes. Margaret stood on our porch carrying 3 gift bags and an arrangement of white roses. Her makeup was careful, her coat expensive, her expression designed for witnesses. Daniel looked through the glass and said, "No." He opened the interior door but kept the locked storm door between them. "You need to leave, Mom. I came to make peace before my grandchild is born." Noah sat in the living room wearing headphones, his game paused. Margaret looked past him as if he were furniture. "We told you not to come here," Daniel said. "You sent legal threats," I added. "This is not reconciliation." Margaret pressed a hand to the glass. "I sent a request for mediation. You people make everything sound criminal." "Leave," Daniel said. Her voice rose. "She said I had stolen her son. She said no woman had the right to cut a grandmother from her own blood. She said the baby would someday learn what we had done." I began recording on my phone. Daniel pointed toward the walkway. "Both of my children are inside this house. You have spent months proving you care about only one." Margaret finally looked at Noah. "That is not the same," she said. The room changed. Noah removed his headphones. His face did not crumple. That would have been easier. He simply became still. "He is my son," Daniel said. "He is her son. The baby is ours." "There is no ours," I said. "There is our family, and you are outside it because you chose to be." Margaret pulled at the storm door handle. Daniel stepped back and called the police. She began crying before the officers arrived, telling neighbors who had come onto their porches that her pregnant daughter-in-law was keeping her from her grandchild. The first officer asked whether we had told her to leave. "They are emotional," Margaret said. "My son doesn't understand what she is doing to him." "Have they asked you to leave?" "Yes, but then you need to leave." As she walked down the steps, she pointed toward Noah and said, loudly enough for the body camera to capture it, "That boy isn't even our blood." Noah waited until the patrol car left before asking the question I had feared for 4 years. "Did I do something that makes her not want me?" I sat beside him, though my belly barely allowed it, and pulled him into my arms. No. She believes blood gives her permission to rank people. It doesn't. Daniel knelt in front of him. This is my failure, Noah. I kept hoping she would become kinder without making her face consequences. You did nothing wrong. Noah looked at him. Do you still want to adopt me? Daniel's voice broke. More than ever. The next morning, Rachel helped us petition for an order of protection based on repeated unwanted contact, the legal pressure, and the escalation at our home. She warned us that family conflicts can be difficult to fit into legal standards. We did not exaggerate. We submitted exactly what we had: the police report, camera footage, messages, letters, the demand for mediation, Claire's statement, and a chronology. Our daughter, Sophie, arrived 3 weeks early after 17 hours of labor. She had Daniel's dark hair, my stubborn chin, and a cry powerful enough to reorganize a hospital floor. For the first 24 hours, I forgot Margaret existed. Then hospital security stopped a woman claiming to be Sophie's grandmother. Margaret had learned about the birth from another relative. She arrived carrying identification, flowers, and a printed copy of Daniel's birth certificate as if it were a backstage pass. Because our privacy alert was active, she never reached the maternity floor. Security documented the attempt and escorted her out. That was the third twist, and it destroyed her claim that she had merely made an emotional mistake at our door. She had planned another boundary violation while we were physically exhausted and medically vulnerable. Rachel added the incident report to our filing. The hearing took place 5 weeks later in a small Cook County courtroom with cold lighting and chairs designed to make waiting feel heavier. Margaret wore a pale cardigan and held a handkerchief. She looked like a grieving grandmother in a television commercial. I arrived with Daniel, Sophie in a carrier, and Noah holding my hand. I had not wanted him exposed to another adult argument, but he asked to attend. I want them to know I count, he said. Rachel arranged our evidence in labeled binders. The truth looks different when it is organized. A single message can be dismissed as emotion. A timeline reveals intention. Margaret's attorney argued that the conflict was an unfortunate family disagreement, intensified by pregnancy and grief. He said Margaret had never threatened physical harm. That was true, and Rachel did not pretend otherwise. She explained that the issue was repeated unwanted contact, attempted entry, legal intimidation, hospital intrusion, and fixation on access to an infant despite both parents' refusal. I testified first. This is not a competition between a mother and a daughter-in-law, I said. Margaret repeatedly ignored clear boundaries. She used my husband's ex-wife to humiliate me, pursued access to our unborn baby while rejecting our older child, came to our home after being told not to, and appeared at the hospital after security had been warned. Her fixation is not simply love. It is hierarchy. I am asking to protect both children from an adult who classifies them by blood. Daniel spoke next. He was so calm that I could hear the ventilation system above us. I grew up responsible for my mother's emotions, he said. I will not give that job to my children. My older son will not be treated as less, and my daughter will not be used as a reward for breaking our boundaries. When he said my older son, Noah squeezed my hand. Margaret cried during her testimony. She said she wanted only to love her grandchild. She described the birthday cake as a regrettable joke. She said the mediation letter had been an attempt at peace. She said she went to the hospital because no grandmother should learn about a birth through strangers. Then the judge asked a simple question. You repeatedly say grandchild. Do you consider both children in your son's household your grandchildren? Margaret paused. Only 1 second, maybe 2. But everyone saw it. The situation with Elena's son is different, she said. I wish him no harm, but the baby carries our blood. Even her attorney closed his eyes. The judge granted a 1-year order covering our home, workplaces, Noah's school, and Sophie's childcare. He explained that the ruling was based on the pattern of contact and attempted circumvention, not on punishment for an unpopular opinion. Margaret was ordered not to contact us directly or through relatives. Outside the courtroom, she shouted that no judge could erase blood. A deputy took 1 step toward her, and she stopped. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired enough to sleep for 4 days. The adoption hearing occurred 2 months later in a different courtroom. Luis's parents sat beside us. His mother carried a framed photograph of Luis holding Noah as a baby. The judge asked Noah whether he understood what adoption meant. It means Daniel is legally my parent, Noah said. It doesn't mean my first dad disappears. The judge smiled. That's exactly right. When the order was signed, Daniel did not make a speech. He hugged Noah, then turned to Luis's parents. Thank you for trusting me, he said. Mr. Rivera shook his head. We aren't giving him away. We're making the team bigger. That sentence undid something in all of us. Afterward, we went to a diner because Noah wanted pancakes even though it was nearly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He placed the adoption order beside the syrup dispenser and kept glancing at it as if the words might rearrange themselves. "So if Mom gets kidnapped by international spies, I stay with you?" he asked Daniel. "That is your first legal question? I need to understand the scope." "Yes. You stay with me. But your mother is unlikely to be kidnapped by international spies. That's what the spies want you to think." Luis's mother laughed until she cried. Then she reached across the table and took Daniel's hand. "Luis would have been jealous of you sometimes," she said. "He was human. But he would have wanted Noah loved more than he wanted his place protected." Daniel looked down. "I wish I could have met him." "You know him," she replied, nodding toward Noah. "Not completely, but enough." We framed the adoption order beside a photograph of Luis. That placement mattered to Noah. It mattered to me too. Our mantle did not tell a neat story. It told the true one. The legal victory did not end the emotional consequences. The order of protection stopped direct contact, but it could not erase the habits Margaret had built into Daniel. When Sophie cried, he sometimes panicked as though another person's distress automatically meant he had failed. If I sounded tired, he rushed to fix things I had not asked him to fix. His counselor called it hyperresponsibility. "Your mother taught you that another person's discomfort was an emergency you had to solve," the counselor told him. "Your daughter needs care, not fear. Your wife needs partnership, not management." Daniel began practicing a sentence that sounded simple and felt revolutionary. "I can love you without controlling how you feel." He said it to me when I was overwhelmed. He said it to Noah after a bad soccer game. Sometimes he said it quietly to himself. I had my own work to do. I had spent years minimizing Margaret's behavior because I wanted to be the reasonable wife. I believed calmness would protect me from accusations of jealousy or control. That meant I often waited until I was furious before speaking. My counselor asked me to name discomfort when it was still small. "A boundary said early sounds less dramatic than a boundary screamed late," she said. So Daniel and I changed the way we argued. We stopped using Margaret as shorthand for every fear. If he forgot to back me up on something minor, I did not say, "You're doing what you always did with your mother." If I became watchful around his relatives, he did not accuse me of seeing enemies everywhere. We described the present moment, even when the past was standing behind it. Rebecca asked to meet Daniel 4 months after Sophie's birth. They chose a public park. She apologized again for sharing the hospital information and did not ask him to forgive Margaret. She brought no gifts and carried no secret message. "Mom told me you would come back when the baby made life difficult," she said. "She said Elena would fail and you would need family." Daniel watched children climb a play structure across the path. "We have family. I know that now." Rebecca admitted Margaret had started calling Sophie's nursery "the room I will never see," and had assembled a crib at her own house despite the order. She had also continued contacting Claire until Claire threatened to seek a no-contact order of her own. "She builds a future in her head," Rebecca said, "and then punishes everyone who doesn't perform it." It was the clearest description of Margaret any of us had heard. Daniel did not restore their old relationship immediately. He allowed Rebecca to send 1 email a month. Trust returned in measured pieces. 6 months later, she met Sophie at a cafe while I was present. She greeted Noah first. That detail was not accidental. It was repair. At home, the ordinary pressure of 2 children kept us honest. Sophie hated bottles unless they were exactly warm enough to suggest supernatural precision. Noah entered middle school and discovered sarcasm as a recreational activity. I returned to the clinic 3 days a week and spent my first lunch break crying in my car because I missed the baby, then felt guilty for missing a home I had been desperate to leave that morning. Daniel took 8 weeks of parental leave. Margaret had raised him to believe competent men provided money while women controlled children. Watching him learn Sophie's different cries, sterilize pump parts, and walk the hallway at 2 a.m. was another quiet rebellion. One night, Sophie would not settle. Daniel carried her past the mantel where the adoption order and Luis's photograph stood. "Your family is complicated," he whispered to her. "That's not the same as broken." I heard him from the stairs and wrote the sentence in my phone. The first violation of the order came through flowers delivered on Mother's Day. The card read, "To the mother of my granddaughter, someday you will understand." There was no signature. The florist confirmed Margaret had paid in cash but used her phone number. Rachel reported it. The judge issued a warning rather than imposing a penalty because the contact was indirect and non-threatening. I felt disappointed until Rachel reminded me that documentation was not failure merely because punishment was not immediate. "The goal is safety and a clear record," she said. "Not dramatic courtroom revenge." The second violation was less ambiguous. A distant cousin mailed Noah a birthday card containing a separate sealed note addressed to Daniel. The cousin later admitted Margaret had asked her to hide it. Police documented the contact, and Margaret was ordered to appear. She claimed she believed family birthday mail was exempt. The judge explained that orders did not contain sentimental exceptions. Margaret received a fine and another explicit warning. For the first time, a consequence reached her without Daniel absorbing it. He expected to feel satisfied. Instead, he grieved for 3 days. "I keep imagining her alone in that house," he said. "Feeling compassion doesn't require opening the door," I told him. That became another sentence we practiced. Noah's relationship with the Riveras deepened after the adoption. Some people had warned us that legal adoption might make Luis's parents feel pushed out. The opposite happened because we spoke about it openly. Mr. Rivera taught Daniel how Luis used to season ribs. Mrs. Rivera gave Sophie a baby blanket she had saved from Noah. They included Daniel in stories rather than testing whether he felt threatened by them. At a summer barbecue, Mr. Rivera raised a glass. "To the men who love our grandchildren," he said, using the plural for Noah and Sophie. Daniel had to look away. The contrast with Margaret was almost painful. The Riveras had no biological connection to Sophie, yet they never ranked her. Margaret shared blood with Sophie and treated that fact like a deed to property. By the time Sophie began pulling herself upright on furniture, our evidence folder had become 2 binders. I hated their weight. I also appreciated what they represented. We no longer depended on memory while someone else revised history. Rachel prepared us for the renewal hearing by asking the question Margaret's attorney would ask. What would she need to do for you to feel safe ending the order? Daniel and I had different first answers. Mine was, leave us alone. His was, acknowledge Noah. Neither was complete. We eventually agreed that real change would require sustained compliance, no indirect contact, specific accountability without blaming me, and recognition that any future relationship could not exclude or rank our children. We were not promising reconciliation if she met those conditions. We were defining what evidence of change might look like. That distinction protected us from bargaining with imaginary future peace. Before the hearing, Noah asked whether Margaret might someday become safe. He was old enough now to understand that adults can change and old enough to distrust easy promises. Maybe, I said. But change is something she would have to do even if we never rewarded her for it. So therapy doesn't automatically mean she gets to come back. No. Therapy is a place to work. It isn't a receipt for access. He considered that. If she apologized to me, would I have to forgive her? Daniel answered before I could. No. An apology belongs to the person giving it. Forgiveness belongs to the person who was hurt. Nobody can schedule yours. The conversation showed me how far Daniel had traveled. Years earlier, Margaret's tears had functioned as a command. Now he could separate another person's remorse from our obligation. We also decided Noah would not testify again unless the judge requested it. At the first hearing, his presence had helped him feel visible. Repeating the experience risked making him responsible for maintaining our safety. Rachel submitted his earlier statement and the adoption order instead. The law now named what Daniel had already promised. On the morning of the renewal hearing, I wore the same navy dress I had worn the first time. It fit differently after pregnancy, and I nearly changed, but then I remembered that court was not a performance of perfection. I packed diapers, formula, crackers, 2 toy animals, and the binders. Family law may revolve around profound questions, but it still happens while a baby throws a sock beneath a courthouse bench. Margaret watched Sophie from across the hallway. Her face softened with a longing so recognizable that for a moment I felt cruel. Then she looked past Noah without greeting him. Compassion left the door open just long enough for reality to walk through. Daniel noticed too. He did not confront her. He simply moved so both children were within the same circle of his body. That was the posture our marriage had spent years learning, not attack, not surrender, but protection without apology. Life after court was not perfect. We installed another camera. We reported 2 letters sent through distant cousins. Sophie developed reflux and screamed between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock every morning for 6 weeks. Daniel and I argued about bottles, laundry, and who had last slept for more than 4 hours. Noah tested the limits of being a new brother by calculating how much money every diaper should earn him. But our house held something sacred. Nobody had to prove they belonged. One evening, Daniel helped Noah with fractions at the kitchen table while I folded laundry with Sophie against my chest. Noah erased a number and said without looking up, "Dad, does this one go here?" All 3 of us froze. Daniel recovered first. "Yeah, son," he said quietly. "Right there." Noah kept writing. Daniel looked at me over his head. I walked into the laundry room and cried into a clean towel, not from sadness, but from everything that one word had repaired without ceremony. When the protection order neared expiration, Margaret petitioned against renewal. She arrived looking smaller and more controlled. She spoke about therapy, patience, and mistakes. For the first time, she admitted the hospital visit had been wrong. I wanted to believe her. Wanting change in someone is a dangerous form of hope because it can make fragments look like a whole person. The judge asked what she had done to repair the harm toward Noah. Margaret talked about future family counseling. She talked about giving everyone time. She talked about Sophie, birthdays, holidays, and her grief. She never said Noah's name. Rachel then introduced a new message sent only 3 weeks earlier to Margaret's sister. Margaret had written, "Once Elena calms down, Daniel will want his real family back." Her sister had become uncomfortable enough to send it to us. The order was renewed. In the parking garage, I asked Daniel whether he felt guilty. "Sad, yes," he said. "Guilty, no." That distinction saved us. Months became a year. The absence of Margaret stopped feeling like war and began feeling like space. Space for cereal spilled before school, unfinished homework, Sophie's first steps, Luis's parents visiting every other Sunday, and Maya bringing cakes whose names I inspected with theatrical suspicion. Claire sent one final email to Daniel through Rachel. She apologized without requesting a response. Daniel read it and chose not to answer, but he did not delete it. Accountability did not require reunion. Sometimes the healthiest ending is simply truth without renewed access. I still think about the cake with Claire's name. It seems absurd that frosting could split a family. But the cake did not cause the break. It showed us the crack that already ran through everything: Margaret's need to choose Daniel's life, her belief that love created ownership, her insistence that blood determined value, and Daniel's lifelong training to confuse guilt with duty. That night, Margaret wanted to remind me I was not the woman she had selected for her son. Instead, she reminded Daniel that he no longer had to live as the son she had designed. I do not know whether she will change. Maybe she will. Maybe she will become fluent in the language of remorse without ever accepting its cost. Real change is not measured by tears, therapy words, or beautifully written apologies. It is measured by accepting a boundary when no reward is promised. It is measured by naming the person you harmed. It is measured by learning that love without respect is only possession wearing perfume. Our home is not quiet. It is crowded, tired, expensive, and full of crumbs. Sophie's toys migrate into every room. Noah pretends he is too old for hugs and then leans against me during movies. Daniel still sometimes reaches for his phone when guilt rises like an old reflex, but now he puts it down and tells me what he is feeling. Both of my children know exactly where they stand. Inside. Entire. Equal. Loved. And no name written in frosting will ever change that again. Sometimes Noah asks for the story of the wrong birthday cake now, and we tell it without turning pain into a family legend. The lesson is not that cruelty deserves a cleverer cruelty in return. It is that belonging must be defended in ordinary decisions, long after the candles go out and the evidence has been cleared from the table.